We are very thankful to have with us today Toni. Could you tell us more about what you do at work?
The overarching recruitment, planning the types of interviews we're going to have, the shortlisting of the candidates.
Could you share some pet peeves you have?
The big pet peeve is certainly the grammatical errors, or when we've asked for a cover letter and we don't receive one. It's like, oh, you were so close.
Do you check applicants' profiles online in social media these days? So hi everyone, I'm Cynthia from Empower to Free. Welcome to our workready here from the Employer series. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Wajjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional owners and custodians of the lands in Canning, and pay my respects to Noongar elders past, present and future. In this episode, we are very thankful to have with us today Toni from the City of Canning. Toni is currently a talent business partner with the city and has over 20 years of experience in strategic talent sourcing and development. So welcome, Toni. Could you tell us more about what you do at work?
Yes, thank you. I think it's really good to be here. So at the City of Canning, I do the overarching recruitment and strategy around that. So planning the types of interviews we're going to have, the shortlisting of the candidates, the selection process, and then the onboarding. But in addition to that, I also look at succession planning. I look at trainees and work experience, apprentices, and I look at all of our wide range of diversity recruitment portfolio options.
Nice. So Toni, tell me, when it comes to applying for jobs, the first step is usually putting in an application for selection. With your expertise in recruitment consulting, could you share with us how do you shortlist applicants?
Sure. So we essentially use a selection criteria to start with. So we have those listed on all of our position descriptions.
Yep.
And those are the criteria that we require in order to be successful in the role.
Yep.
So that's the first point of call. The second point is that obviously we look at things like grammatical structure, presentation, following directions. So if we've asked for something specific in the ad, that's followed through in the application process.
Yep.
And then we look for the values that the city holds. We look for people who indicate that they would sort of align with those values of authenticity, resilience, creativity, and collaboration. So if we can get that in an application, then that's a fantastic bonus.
Sure, sounds great. So with that in mind, how important is it to stand out during this filtering process?
It is really important. Yeah, it is absolutely important. Little things like, misspelling somebody's name that you're putting it to the attention of, the way that your resume is formatted, the grammatical errors that are in a resume, those things can really, unfortunately, put the shortlisting panel off because we only have maybe a few hours to look at all the CVs, and it could be a couple hundred CVs to look at.
I see. So I guess from what I'm hearing is that making sure that the selection criteria is succinctly addressed and clear for the panel to look at. It's a bonus if you can kind of weave in the values and just kind of stand out in terms of, not in a negative way, but in a positive way where there are no spelling errors, grammatical errors, and making sure that the names of the recruiter or the recruitment manager is being spelled correctly. Those are really important. That's
right. Those are some of the basics that we look for, because usually in any position description, you're going to see mention of attention to detail.
Yeah.
And when those things aren't done in an application, there's an assumption they won't be done on the job as well.
Fair enough. So Toni, if I could ask you to think back about, all the applications you've seen across your career, right? Was there any that positively or negatively, left a huge impression on you?
I can't think of one specific one that has made an impression on me, but I will tell you that resumes that come across as really tidy, that their formatting is nice, they're easy to look at. Resumes where I can quickly get to the information that I need to make a decision on whether or not someone's suitable. Those are the ones that tend to stand out. Ones where we have to read through paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of information to get to what it is that they've done or what it is that they want to do. Those are very tricky because it takes a lot of effort to get to there. So I definitely recommend being succinct, straightforward, and simple. A simple resume is just fine. 2 to 3 pages, that's all we need to get an idea of who you are and what you bring to the table.
Are there any visual tips that you could give to the viewers on how to make their resume simple?
Yeah. So I think what I like to see in terms of a format is a little bit of an objective. So what is it that you're looking for? A small history, a little snapshot on what your career is. So maybe a few bullet points on, 10 years in the such and such industry, loyal and dedicated team member, a couple little snapshot things, and then get straight into the work history. So really clear, what was my job? How long was I there for? What company was I working for? And then what was core of what I did? And then repeat that until you get to sort of the last 10, 20 years max of your work history that's relevant. If it's not relevant, you can put it in an additional information section if you want to at the end of the CV. So if you've done for the last 10 years in construction, but before that you were in elderly care, well then that might be an additional information not relevant to this job.
That's a really good tip, putting things into additional notes rather than putting it into the resume. What would you say to young teenagers who probably maybe don't have much experience but are trying to get a job?
I think for young people, the best idea is to utilize the experience that they do have. So if they've ever volunteered in a group, if they've ever helped their parents produce anything, do a project, if they've ever done a school assignment that was particularly interesting or intensive, to include that information and the references from those experiences, because while it's not paid work experience, it's still valuable. So I would recommend definitely listing a few of those things on a CV so that they still have something that a recruiter can look at and make a decision on.
And how important is it to have references listed on your resume from your perspective?
Personally, I actually don't think it's that important. I tend to recommend people say references available upon request or excellent references available upon request, and then you can provide them during the interview process. If they've been asked for in the application, then certainly they need to be there. But sometimes you'll find that a supervisor may judge you based on whose reference you've listed. They might say, oh, that person's not a supervisor, so therefore, why isn't your supervisor being a reference? Where there might be a whole story behind that until you've had a chance to tell them in an interview, you might not want them to have to make a judgment call before they've even met you.
That's a very good point as well to mention. So if we now move on to the negative parts of application, could you share some pet peeves you have? I mean, you mentioned earlier grammatical errors, especially spelling the name of the person wrongly. Are there any other pet peeves that people should not do on their resume writing?
Okay, so I personally don't think we need to know about your hobbies.
That's a good one.
It's a wonderful thing that people like to do all sorts of different things, different hobbies. If it's not relevant to the role, and if you're not a young person without work history, I don't think it needs to be listed. I certainly don't think birth dates need to be listed unless, again, you're a young person and you're applying for a junior role. But I definitely, the big pet peeve is certainly the grammatical errors, or when we've asked for a cover letter and we don't receive one, it's like, oh, you were so close.
So in that context, right, if you ask for a cover letter and the applicant didn't put in one, but had a really good resume that matched the selection criteria and the values of the job, etc., how badly does that affect his or her chances of getting through to the next stage?
They can be long listed. So there's long listing and short listing. So somebody with a good CV without a cover letter, when we've specifically asked for a cover letter, which we do on all of our ads, they can be long listed, but oftentimes if there's multiple suitable candidates and the others have followed the instructions, they wouldn't be shortlisted for an interview. If they're the only ones with the experience, then certainly they would still get their foot in the door. But if they didn't have or if they did have an equal level of experience, but if they didn't follow our basic requirements, then very likely they wouldn't make it to the top 3.
So it's really important to follow and submit everything that's required in the job advert, and to make sure they address the selection criteria to be very simple and succinct, and to make sure that there's no grammatical errors.
And the thing is, they can call us. We have our phone number listed. So I always recommend, if you've got really good questions to ask. You want to get it right on the application. You usually have 2 weeks to apply for a role. So give us a call and we can answer those questions before you apply, so you can actually resolve any of those issues even before you submit your application.
So don't waste the time, and make sure that they take all the resources that they have available to help them get the application through the door, right?
That's it. I mean, we put our phone number on there for a reason so that we can answer those questions for them. So I say take advantage of it if you can.
Sounds great. So I've got another question for you. Given that, in this day and age, we are all digital natives in a way, would you recommend people still putting in their application through a hard copy or sending it through email?
No, I don't recommend that. I definitely recommend going through the standard application process. So if the job is seen and advertised online, that you go through the application process online. We do sometimes get hard copies brought in. It's very difficult for us to then match the selection criteria, because when you do your application online, you actually answer selection criteria there as well. So it allows us to do some more direct shortlisting. So if we receive an application in a hard copy or an email, we tend to try and get them to go back and apply online as well.
So it's I guess the guiding principle is really to make the selection panel's job as easy as possible to get your application through to the next stage, right?
That's it. That's it. Because we do have applicants that come through and they haven't done all the information requested, and oftentimes I'll have to email them and ask them to either submit it again or send it through again. And sometimes they don't even get back to me. So if you have to sort of follow multiple steps to get somebody to get their application in, they're just a lot less likely to get their foot in the door.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess, do you check applicants' profiles online in social media these days?
It's not a regular practice of mine. LinkedIn is certainly one that I would look at, because LinkedIn is where you would put your professional profile, and that allows us to sort of double check dates. So if we have maybe a question mark about somebody and they've got a LinkedIn profile, we may match up what they've said on their resume to their LinkedIn profile. But for me, no, it's not a practice to check, Facebook and Twitter and all of that as at an early stage in the process. But I do recommend people keep their profiles clean, because I know that there are lots of recruiters out there that do check.
Sounds great. So I think that's pretty much the questions I have for you today. Thank you so much for your time, Toni, and we really appreciate it. And to everyone else watching, we know that this will help you sharpen your employability skills. So stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you.